Thank you for joining me. These virtual events are kind of growing on me, but I do miss the eye contact. I love the energy when you're in the same room together. Hopefully soon. We're all learning a lot, aren't we? And forgetting a lot too, or maybe that's just me. I swear I'm going to start rewarding myself simply for remembering what day of the week it is within 5 seconds or less, maybe 10 seconds for Tuesdays. About a month ago, I learned that while it's never a great thing to stab oneself in the hand with a kitchen knife, it's especially problematic during a pandemic. It was a Friday night and I had no plans, and then suddenly I had an emergency. My first thought is that I could not go to an emergency room right now, followed by the realization that since I had apparently hit an artery, I wouldn't have a choice in that. So as I tried to manipulate my phone while applying pressure to one hand with the other, I then came upon my real dilemma, which was, who do I call? Who's in quarantine? Who's self-isolating? Who's at risk? Those are not the questions you should be running through as you're like rapidly transforming your kitchen to look more like a crime scene. But it all worked out. I got taken care of, stitched up, and everything's healed fine. But it made me remember years ago when I would have had the same kind of question, but for very different reasons. About 20 years ago, my life started some detours that I was not crazy about. There was the deaths of 3 close family members, including both my parents within months of one another, and then a lengthy divorce. It was just a really rough, dark time. I found myself helping to care for my 2 surviving grandmothers, caring for 3 young kids, my beautiful kids, while I was relaunching a career, taking care of a home, which was wonderful to have, but still a lot of work, and then navigating the divorce stuff. It was hard. It was really hard. I was over my head. I was the lady running down the driveway at 7 a.m. in my bathrobe, dragging a trash can after the garbage truck had gone by. I found out later that one of the guys told me that they had actually been in the habit of circling the block twice, knowing that I would hear the truck the first time and have that can at the curb by the time they came around on a second lap, which was so kind. If I'd only known, I imagine there were many other little kindnesses I wasn't aware of, and that would have really helped me because it just felt so lonely then. I really felt like I was all by myself in the world and just caring for everybody else and with nobody to help me. It was a hard, hard time. The thing is, when you're in that kind of a situation, when you don't feel good about your life or yourself, it's hard to fix it. It's very difficult to extricate. You're not in a position to do anything about much of anything. You don't think, I'm lonely. I know, I'll make friends. It doesn't work that way. No, you just tend to hide a little more. If I was asked, how are you? By the time all the filters dropped, don't want to talk about that. I can't talk about that. How do I explain this? I didn't have much left. I retreated more and more is what my response was. I kind of ended up in a social hibernation of sorts. So as my misery grew and I knew I had to do something, it was important to me to be a good example for my kids, to be a good mom, and a miserable person was not a great example, no matter how well you tried to camouflage it. So finally, I had the bright idea, put that in quotes, please, that of course my life's a mess. Obviously, I need to date. I know, not real logical. I guess I figured I'd find someone looking for a fixer-upper. I had a few projects that needed some help. Should have been doing them myself, to be truthful. But the experience, at least, opened my eyes. It led me to begin exploring the reasons why we date and why we seek romantic relationships, and the reasons, how we do it, why we do it, all of that. It was really fascinating to me, and I ended up writing my book Date Like a Grown-Up as a result of that, which is good. I interviewed a lot of people, learned an awful lot, continue to. Nothing like people finding out you wrote a dating book, and you get all kinds of wonderful stories to add to your banks of knowledge. But I appreciate that many have found the book to be helpful to them. What I hear is it kind of helps them to set their own self and create their own path through the dating process, which was the hope. And in all the interviews I did, I found that also to be so reassuring. And I found that from readers too. There's something about finding out that your mistakes are common ones, that other people have done the same things, that really helps. And it helps you to really understand, to identify and understand the better methods, the better ways to navigate the whole process. You see, when we're lonely, we don't make the best decisions. Not really a surprise if we think about it, but I remember a widow telling me years ago, she hated being alone. She wanted to be married again. And so she signed up for a year on Match.com and immediately realized not what she needed. She was still grieving her husband. She unsuccessfully tried to argue with them, but I'm a new widow. New widows make poor decisions. They didn't actually go for that. And I wouldn't say widows. I would agree, though, that when we're desperate, when we're trying to solve that space issue in our lives, when we're in a desperate situation, when we've had those feelings, we don't pick well. It's like walking into a gas station hoping to find a nutritious meal. If you're really hungry and you're grabbing, you're going to walk out with, pork rinds and a day-old hot dog. Not what you would choose if you had the bandwidth, the time to be selective. And that's what we really need in our big decisions of life. I want to read to you now from this book, Date Like a Grown-Up. This is from a section called Helping Yourself in the Reset, Dignity Be Damned, Desperate Choices. We're smarter than we think we are. It's only paranoia when we apply our reservations in a general fashion. Sometimes we just have a feeling, or have a feeling that we should have a feeling. Desperate choices are the ugly moments shared only with our closest friends, those whispered admissions that bond us with the realization of how low we can truly go, and the turning points from which we pledge to hold one another to higher standards. These include my friend who slept with her married chiropractor after discovering her husband modeling business suits for another woman, and my friend who reluctantly attended an adult sex party in an effort to keep a relationship afloat. Other uglies showing up for repeated late-night booty calls with a completely uncommitted man, faithfully waiting for months on a fickle guy off on a secret mission, sleeping with an ex-boyfriend's best friend, sleeping with a sister's ex-boyfriend, texted ultimatums, tearful voicemails. Every friend has a handful worth cringing over. It's an endless list, and the main reason I first began writing this book. A desperate choice is compulsive, impulsive, and almost always incorrect. It's a futile attempt to ankle grab a departing love interest in hope of turning vapor to solid. We make these kinds of decisions when we forget or willfully ignore our alternatives. These choices go with statements such as, I'm not going to be alone. I can't live without him. He can't live without me. And that's the last time. And these desperate choices usually will create a last time with the target, because they can be real bridge burners. They can also be revelatory. Learning to trust in your strength to overcome life's challenges is empowering. Knowing that friends are available to help you do it, even better. I'm going to next read from one of the stories in here. I mentioned there's a lot of interviews, and it's a lot of life experience. This one, though, happens to be one of mine. It's titled, What's Your SAT Score? I scanned the dark interior of the sports bar for my meet and greet guy, camouflaging nervousness with a smile and hoping I wouldn't run into a neighbor. No thanks. No, I'm meeting someone. No, I don't see him yet. Actually, I'm not sure I'll even recognize him. Awkward. I had reluctantly re-upped for match after Jim and I broke things off. Danielle pushed me to get back out there, and I was doing my feeble best. Meet and greet Mac found me at a high top table when he walked in 10 minutes late. Hey, you look nice. Mac was slightly under my minimum age, but I was in a state of post breakup open mindedness. Older didn't work. Let's try younger this time. We ordered beers. You're a writer? He was quite pleased. My life is really interesting. You should write about me. I should honestly be your next book. He began fairly close to the beginning and ordered us second beers shortly after his varsity football career and high school graduation. I should have made a graceful exit, but hadn't been out in weeks. And I had painted my nails. Kind of a big deal for me. Finally, though, he turned the conversation to me. Hey, what's your SAT score? I smiled. What? Your SAT, what did you get on it? I got a 1450. Could have gone higher if I'd taken it again. What was yours? I kept smiling because I didn't know what else to do with my lips. I have no idea. Don't really remember. Sure you do. He grinned at me. No, I really don't. I regretted painting my nails. From there, he launched chronologically until the part where his fiance's baby failed the paternity test he had requested. I got the envelope at work, walked out to a bar and got trashed, broke off the engagement, wasn't going to keep another guy's kid. We floundered there for a moment. I'm sorry, and I was, for his heartbreak, for the girl and the kid, for letting him order me a second beer. You don't just lay a little wax paper over the food? Nah, she always cleans it. He was talking about his mom and his microwave oven. I half expected him to pull out a beer bong and invite me to a toga party. I thanked him for the evening and escaped. How was it? Danielle answered on the first ring as I reached safety in my car moments later. Awful. He wanted to know my SAT score. What? It was weird. He's in his late 30s, but he sounded like a high school or college kid. His mom cleans his apartment for him, and she lives in Florida. So I'm guessing the floor is a little sticky most of the time? Ew, she laughed. Fast forward about 3 months. No, Danielle, he's that SAT guy I told you about. Awful, you don't want to go there. Huh? Danielle was back on Match and looking to fill gaps after her breakup with Randy. That guy I told you about, it's him. The guy who asked me my SAT score, remember? And he said I had bad body language. Oh, because you were facing away from him. Yeah, I crossed my legs in the opposite direction. So then he starts talking about all the psychology classes he took in college. Danielle, you do not want to go out with him. No way, she laughed. She spiraled down into his end zone the next night. It's just a drink. I can't sit here alone tonight. I sighed. 1450. What? His SAT score. I heard a laugh. She had me on speakerphone as she applied makeup. Just see if he asks you about your SAT. You might want to look up your old test score. I think that's one of his standard get-to-know-you questions. Can't be that bad. Better than sitting home alone. She called me on her way home. Oh my God, he asked me. Your SAT? Yes. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. Honestly, I'm looking forward to being alone in my house with my cat in a movie. That was bad. He texted her at 4 a.m. She called me at 7. I said, what the hell? Can't believe I gave him my phone number. I couldn't resist. Tried to warn you. Yeah, when we're isolated, it actually throws off our perceptions, of the world around us. It impacts the way we approach people, the way we respond to people. It actually affects our thinking process. There's proven cognitive impact. if we're alone too long, if we get lonely. So when you try to date from that place, you can see there's room for some problems, right? I mean, it's easier to fall into those old ruts because they look familiar, you know? Oh, I remember that. We repeat our mistakes. We are less likely to recognize our patterns. And a lot of people do the rebound thing. Rebound relationships are used to absorb the pain of the love lost rather than to like address it in a positive, constructive way. Uh, People fall in love with hypothetical people. This is the potential partner that kind of resembles what you're looking for. So instead of waiting, though, for them to reveal who they are, you go ahead and toss all your hopes and dreams on them and then get like disappointed or angry when it turns out that everything you saw was actually the stuff that you put on them, not who they actually are. Yeah, we do that. And it comes from being in a hurry, frankly. When urgency in dating is often our best effort to keep busy so we can fill that space that's there. There are other ways to do it, but this is a thing that people do again and again. Unfortunately, it causes issues. So, and when we're isolated and busy, actively trying to fill that space, we miss important things. Okay, here's one of mine. Miss important things. Yes. So I was meeting a political reporter on a patio for a drink. It was like October, beautiful day. It was one of the 3 days we had good weather here, sunshine. It was gorgeous. So we sat out there under an umbrella until well after dark. Just lots to talk about. Conversation flowed, a lot of commonalities. Great, great time. But as the evening closed down, I realized I really didn't have a true sense of whether that chemistry thing was there or not, because we'd been under an umbrella and wearing sunglasses, and then it was dark, and you need eye contact to really know. I think eye contact is important. So, we decided we'd have dinner. Great. It took us about a month, though, to get to that, just with our schedules. But the night finally came, and just as I'm going out the door, I get a phone call. Oops, should have made a reservation. No problem. He wanted me to. I was more familiar with the area, so I selected a place between us and took off. Well, by the time it was November, windy, rainy, cold. I blew into that restaurant like I'd come on a tornado from Kansas or something. My, hair, I couldn't even see. So I'm thinking I'm going to run the restroom, at least adjust a little bit, but he walks out. So date is on officially at that moment. So we chit chat a little bit, talk about the weather. I asked how his day had been, and he asked about mine. And then we just kind of stood there looking at one another, smiling very awkwardly. And I thought, no chemistry whatsoever. It's going to be a long evening. And then he looks a little closer at me and says, will anyone else be joining you for dinner, miss? Yes. It was the restaurant manager. Oh my gosh, my date was already seated at a table in the back. I begged him not to tell my date. I was so embarrassed. But yeah, when you're busy, you miss important things like what they look like. So to date well, to do anything well, to parent well, to develop your career in the ways you wish to be an active, helpful person in your community, any area of your life, you need a good friend foundation first. This is pivotal. I realized at some point along the way that my biggest issue was not the lack of a relationship, it was the lack of relationship in general. That was a big one. So I went to my plan B, accidentally, of course, but my plan B was this Cabernet Coaches group. It was truly an accident, but what a lucky one it was. I created an access point for women to begin finding friendships. Sounds simple, but what a pivotal thing it's been. Because once you have that foundation, you make better decisions for anybody in your life, and it ripples on from there. The University of Oxford has a social body lab that has done studies on athletes, rowers, rugby players, using synchrony and coordinated warm-ups to give them the sense of not being alone. And they found that this social placebo, this supplying of a bonding and support significantly improves their performance. Of course it does. And it does the same for us in every area of our life wherever we're able to have that sensation of not being alone and being part of a larger community. We just do better. Our friends reflect back a truer image of ourselves. They remind us who we really are. They help us see who we still can be. They remind us that the world's a little bigger than our immediate thoughts and plans and problems, and give us that bigger perspective that, I don't know, gives us bigger possibilities, I guess. They create options, yeah, truthfully. And the options help us make thoughtful choices rather than desperate ones. If you're interested in the group in more detail, there's some video on how we got started, kind of the origin story on Facebook, I believe. I know probably on my website, heatherduganauthor.com. But yeah, it changed everything for me. So it led to seeing the success of this, seeing the changes in women's self-perceptions, the opportunities they began to create for themselves, the impact on the way their children went on from there. I mean, I heard from children saying, "Thank you for getting my mom into this." It led me to do a lot of study on how we get isolated, how we can get better connected, how we develop friendships and build community. I saw the importance of it and really wanted to understand the process so that we can replicate and really develop better and better opportunities for all of us. So that led to more writing, of course. I think that's one of the best things about, when you go through tough times and then all of a sudden you understand that your misery can actually be writing material, that you can repurpose something that was really hard into something that's useful. It's wonderful. It's just like therapeutic, amazing revelation stuff. So anyhow, that's what led to writing The Friendship Upgrade, which that's this book. There, a little better picture there. But and that kind of lays out ways that people can do those things to reconnect themselves and build better communities and right where they are. So isolation hurts a lot. Some of us are really struggling right now. Some people were already in a position of isolation, and this has just taken them further down, which is a very sad thing. We have this biologically based instinct that goes back to our ancestors, that whole fight or flight thing. That came because, they needed community in order to survive. We feel the same kinds of bodily effect for social threats as well. It's important to realize that. Things like being isolated or feeling rejected or forgotten, feeling lonely will generate that same kind of panic in us. It's a stress response. And we want to herd and huddle right now. That is the instinct. We don't feel like we can be, when we can't get ourselves safe in that way, our bodies continue through that stress response. We cycle through it again and again because it's an ongoing threat then. And in the long term, if we can't get that settled down, that's where it begins to skew perceptions. It creates these ineffective responses and the self-perpetuating behaviors that can prolong loneliness for people and turn it into a more chronic condition, trapping them exactly where they don't want to be. So much of our identity comes through our interactions with others. And many are discovering right now that their connections aren't as strong as they thought they were. That's really troubling. People that maybe relied more on work contacts, they're discovering that, maybe most of their interactions came from colleagues or clients or coworkers. And they're finding this gap in their life right now where people should be. There are a lot of different reasons this can happen. And if that's you, first thing, please understand you're not defective in any way. These things happen to us often through a series of unfortunate events, uncontrollable circumstances. Honest, I promise. In the Friendship Upgrade, I talk a lot about the impact of this digital communication that waters down conversation. We've really relied on that. Our heavy use of technology and data on demand We spend a lot more time in the digital zone than in the interpersonal zone. Our lifestyle pace, the weakened social ties, people are more at risk. A simple transition like a job change, a move, a divorce, a new baby, an empty nest, these kinds of transitions can bump us off course to where we don't have social connection anymore. And when you're rebuilding logistics, when you are simply adjusting to the physical changes, it's very difficult to focus on building friendships in the new place. Even though we need it, even though it's essential, it isn't the first place we go, and over time it becomes harder to do so. You can see how this is a big problem. You can see how this could be a big problem for communities if a lot of people start falling in that situation right now. I'm going to read to you about, this is from chapter 3 in here, the efficiency effect. The efficiency effect is it's a series of outcomes that come from over-efficiency, which is our attempt to manage the unmanageable, basically. So it can, the space filler choices are what I'm specifically going to read to you about. Those can come about as a procrastination tool, a default choice. Sometimes it's avoidance for sure. A painkiller as well can be a good reason for picking something like this. It seems counterintuitive. Busy people seem so well connected, but have you ever noticed they're never connected to you? The predominant direction is usually away. They touch base with you before invariably launching on to the next appointment, obligation, or responsibility. It may present as an infilling, but the expected fullness never really materializes, just more busyness. The net result is more space in the space. I've done it. How about you? In my self-designated roles of supermom, wife, and mega volunteer, space scared me. In a house cluttered with matchbox cars and glitter glue, traded later for soccer cleats and track spikes, an overabundance of physical space was never an issue. Emotional space, however, was hard to avoid. I could deal with vomit in school project deadlines. You need to have a completed paper mache replica of the Ohio Cavern for third period tomorrow? It was harder to handle what was crowding the space in my head. Our marriage was shaky, although neither my ex-husband or I would have said so. The tremors were easily attributed to a busy stage of life and dealing with some prolonged conflict in my extended family. Normal stuff. But then came the back-to-back deaths of my parents and my grandfather's stage 4 brain cancer diagnosis, grief upon grief, and more family drama. In the past, emotional dysfunction served as our wobbly gravitational force, adhering us together with mutual need. But this time, self-preservation generated a much stronger centrifugal energy and began to pull us apart. Wading through a rising tide of loss, I poured myself into helping my grandparents in Florida, and then into regaining the time lost from my kids with every bit I had left. One-way flights, uncertainty, growing guilt that I couldn't be everywhere at once. My ex-husband, unable to find a reset button with which to fix it all, began seeking refuge at work. Isolated by my grief, so lonely now amidst this flurry of caring for others, I spun between feeling desperately needy and stoically independent. I had no sense of which side would prevail, but needy felt a closer match to my inner confusion. Even though I sensed my need was for a connectedness unavailable in my marriage. The space grew like a nervous perspiration stain. It looked bad, smelled bad. I didn't know what to do with it. So after Grandpa died, I took on more. Lots of volunteering for the kids' schools and our church. I gardened and ran like a maniac. We traveled. I obsessed over anything I could conjure up that would deflect from the deepening issues in our marriage, carefully avoiding thought triggers such as romantic movies and books and the happiness of other married couples we knew. I filled the space in my head with music when I ran and with spy filler fiction during the rare quiet moments. There's no time to think, there's no problem, right? But there was this blank expanse on my bedroom wall that I'd stare down when I was feeling brave. I'd look at that patch of creamy bareness and wonder how I'd fill my life if I had any choice in the way I lived it. I can find a lot of what ifs to that spot, like an etch-a-sketch that I'd scribble on in moments of silent misery and then carefully shake away before anyone else could see the pictures. My busyness was essential to maintaining the status quo, and those brief moments of etch-a-sketch reflection were dangerous, revealing to me all the more how much space I had to fill. Sometimes, Superwoman gets busy saving the world so that she won't have to figure out how to save herself. Many of us do this. We avoid difficult decisions and painful reflection by making space filler choices. Space filler choices are options we value not for their effectiveness, but instead for their proximity and volume, allowing us to postpone hard decisions and inadvertently prolong our emotional turmoil. Disconnection in marriage? People have babies and affairs. They obsess over extraneous details and buy things they don't need as they shop for bigger and bigger houses. They work harder and focus on or even generate outside stresses to deflect attention from what they aren't ready to face. Outside of marriage? After a divorce, perhaps. The newly single adult often obsesses over the sins of the departing partner or speed dates toward his or her replacement. Thoughtful reflection is rarely part of the initial response. It hurts. We seek sedatives and painkillers. Filling the heart with other matter, TV watching, loud music, reading, fitness routines, other people's problems, health issues, work. All of these allow us to tell the elephant in the room, just a minute, indefinitely. In this book, the interviews and stories that specifically, I guess the slice of life stories, they're called Unvarnished Disclosure. And this one is titled No Time for Friends. Carol worked. She credits 25 wedding anniversaries to her typical 70-hour work week. The marriage never had a chance. He didn't love me. We had a 10-year age difference. He targeted me, a younger woman, because he wanted children. We had sex only to get me pregnant, and he was indifferent after he had his children. I think we had sex less than 15 times in our 25-year marriage. Eventually, he told me that I was unattractive, unlovable, that no one knows you like I do, and that he didn't even like me. As a devout Christian, divorce didn't seem like an option. It was God hates divorce, so buck up, move on. I had no choice. And no friends. Carol suffered alone. Her one close friend, Abby, lived miles away in Nevada. It was pride, embarrassment, Carol said of her initial non-disclosure. Abby wouldn't have judged her, but Carol judged herself. I finally tried counseling 4 years in and was told to submit, quit working, and all kinds of foolishness. After getting that kind of response 3 or 4 times, I just withdrew. If that's your answer, I'm not going to disclose my problem. But it was lonely. In those 25 years, I didn't have a single local woman I could call or text and say, let's go to a movie or want to have dinner? Oh, sure, there were moms I sat next to on the bleachers during the kids' games. There were work colleagues, but I couldn't share the details of my life. So I worked harder. I couldn't say I needed friends if I didn't have time for them. She withdrew and narrowed her focus. I had 3 beautiful kids. I decided to just throw myself into raising them. And her work. My ex-husband quit working 6 years into our marriage. In theory, he was going to help me with my business, but in reality, his world was TV and our kids. He never worked again. In essence, I became an income and domestic servant. 120 additional pounds later, Carol was filled with disgust and shame. If my own husband found me repulsive, who would or could love me? So I worked. It filled my time, but not my heart. Carol has now learned the value of transparency. Only in the past few years have I learned to be vulnerable. I've been divorced 2 years now. I feel like I've moved at warp speed because I was very intentional in pursuing healing. One of the big early hurdles I crossed, the hardest thing to admit, was my vulnerability, my woundedness, to finally say, yes, I need friends. I can't do this alone. I can't be superwoman and pretend this doesn't hurt. It was life changing to admit that friendships are essential to my emotional health. A lot of good stories like that in this book. It feels almost right now like we are in some strange social experiment. Everything's throttled back, or the pace slowed down or stopped. We've eliminated many of the usual distractions that would take our focus. We instead sit in this huge transition time together. That's what this is. It's a huge life change that we're all experiencing in the same moment. We're sharing something that a lot of people have known on a regular basis, that isolation thing that has led many towards loneliness. And while we experience isolation in different ways, depending on your makeup, to be feeling that separateness all at the same time seems important, because we're all within this together, truthfully. I've been looking at the whole issue since, I think it's been since 2013 or so, and I was really concerned back then. It's only grown worse. The fact that we've landed here at the same time right now really seems significant. I mean, we're finally able to talk about it, and that is huge. Have you ever watched failing relationships where like one person tries and then the other, but never at the same moment? This is right now, it feels like we are here in the same moment. And that does seem significant to me. There's an opportunity for sure to begin making some different choices. I do see some good things happening, and I'm hopeful, very hopeful for more. We're certainly more aware of other people right now. All this swings through all kinds of feelings depending on what's going on that day. It seems, we need people. We're also afraid of them. We're not sure who to be afraid of. We're wary of those outside our bubble mainly. But, we know we need people. Simultaneously, we need them to stay 6 feet away and be using hand sanitizer. We're very appreciative of encouragement from other people. We feel a need to encourage them ourselves because we're understanding what that does inside of us to encourage one another. I can't tell you how many people have stopped me at the grocery or on a trail somewhere, just so hungry for conversation. That need for interaction is so strong right now. In these conversations we have from 6 or 10 feet away, it fills something that it needs filled right now. People need conversation and connection. Overall, one of the better things, these people will say, I'm lonely. I haven't talked to anybody in 2 months, and that's a big thing because traditionally this has been kind of a shameful thing to us. We're beginning to understand how undeserved it often is. And I think some of the stigma is sliding away, thankfully. But also right now, I've seen, with the busyness diminished, with less distractions, we're more aware of ourselves in a new way, a different way than many are accustomed to. Our habits, our failings, hopefully our successes too. But there's more introspection. It's kind of uncomfortable for some people. That's one of the reasons they've stayed busy, to avoid things. But it's certainly a good opportunity to connect right now with ourselves. And that's essential in order to connect well with others. So that seems like a very positive thing if we take advantage of it. I encourage you to check out Pause, Reset, Connect if that sounds like something. I don't know if that just like lights a little fire in you somewhere. I've also noticed when we ask how you're doing, people are more authentic in their answers. They're really telling us now. And people pause to really listen to those responses. So there's more genuine engagement. Very good thing. We got so skilled at not seeing one another for such a long time. You'd walk along a trail or a sidewalk and people's cell phones would be up to their faces, right? There's less of that now. We see people even if they aren't on our screen now from a distance, but it's like people are just enjoying what's around them more and are back to the basic essentials, I think. And that's a good thing, to be more aware of what's immediately in our vicinity, which includes other human beings in the moment, right? I do have concerns, though. I mean, just that our responses to one another really fluctuate depending on the news of the day. We see that. You can pretty much take it right outside and see it in the way that, whether if somebody's been paying more attention to their newsfeed than anything else, it's going to show up a little differently in the way they respond to people. And the masks that many of us are wearing hide some very important social cues that we usually would rely on, which is our facial expressions. And, there's less opportunity to really use the tone and nuance that gives us a bigger picture of what somebody's really communicating to us. And when we don't readily see those things, people look away a lot more easily. And when we have to keep the distance, people look away as they're walking away. Averting eyes is beginning to happen again, and we really need to work to make the eye contact. We need to let people know we see them. We need to be aware, wave, thumbs up. Even if you can't, show a smile, we can show it in other ways, hopefully. I think it's really important that we do, so that we can eventually re-engage in a good, strong way. We have made some new habits through this time, not just these that I've just spoken of, but other ones in the quiet of our homes that we're going to have to nudge ourselves out of in order to be more social when we are able to again. It's hard to change habits. It was hard to change into this time. It's going to be just as hard in many ways to move back again to a more connected society. And we need to be thoughtful about how we approach re-engagement at the end of this, communities included, because there are a lot of people that have been at risk and are more at risk as a result of this. The self-perpetuating factor of isolation is really troubling. I think that communities and informed individuals like you and me really need to be alert to people that perhaps have had perceptions and changed through the experience and may not be as quick to reach out again. That's a very normal reaction, and we need to be understanding of that. We also need to be aware of the changes that might be happening in our own heads and hearts. Be aware of the tricks that our brains can play on us. Because to be our best selves, we're going to have to push through all that. In order to connect with others, we're going to have to push through a lot of different things at the end of this. I'm grateful that I wrote these books before this happened, because for me, as hard as this is, this abnormal time, as challenging as this disconnection is, I feel like all that I learned is it's really helped me to cope a lot better than I would have. And I think right now, that we're all learning things that will help us to be more effective in the way that we build our relationships coming out of it again, if we are aware and take advantage of what's available to us in the life lessons right now. But to build more cohesive communities as we come out of it really begins with our individual and one-on-one connections that we make. So that's what we need to start with. And if you're alone right now, please reach out to people. I know it's uncomfortable, it feels hard, but you need to do it for, if you have children, I would say do it for them, but do it for yourself. You really need to let somebody know, and you need to reach out. And if you're struggling, even just check out some of the other talks I've got coming up. Look for other resources online. consider, if you need to talk to a therapist, don't let yourself sit alone and go through this by yourself, because you aren't. You truly aren't. Just, we're all in bubbles right now, but we won't always be that way. It's going to get better again. I want to share with you a little more information in case you're interested in the books that I've mentioned. Here's the Friendship Upgrade. It's available in multiple formats: paperback, ebook, and audiobook. And you can find it on Amazon, headlinebooks.com, heatherduganauthor.com, your local bookstore, of course, and libraries. Audiobook is on Audible, as well as some other places as well, but Audible seems to be what people recognize. Date Like a Grown-Up, all over the place. More in relationships in there, romantic relationships, dating relationships. And I do love speaking and doing workshops. I'm booking in a year out right now because we're just not real sure about what live events are going to happen, as in same room live. But if you have any virtual events you need speakers for too, certainly consider me. On my website, you can print out the sheet on the right there that you see. There's additional topics you can find in the drop-down list there. And if there's any content that isn't specifically mentioned, just talk to me. These concepts go across the board for businesses, organizations, for community groups, and people have found them very, very helpful. Just check out the testimonials if you want to know a little more. And then, yes, I also do talks on dating and relationships. And here are a couple more that will be coming up that these are ones that I've done in workshop format before, and I'm going to bring them online. So if you wish to connect with me, here is how you would do it: Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. There's my email and phone number. And if you have an idea for a future topic, or feel free to reach out. We want to do more of these videos and keep in touch with you. Please be encouraged. We are going to get through this. We're going to land strong. We always do, because we don't have to do it by ourselves. Thank you.